Rich, thanks for speaking with us. Just give us an update now on these aftershocks. One measuring 6.2. Will they get stronger than that?
That's right. There's been one 6.2, and we're just under a dozen of these so far. A very typical type pattern expected after a large event like this. And even larger events might be expected to continue for weeks and months after a big earthquake like this.
Okay, but in the immediate aftermath of this, obviously everyone's thinking about the next couple of hours, maybe the next 24 hours. In terms of aftershocks, what can people in this region expect?
I'd say expect more aftershocks and be ready. Everybody who's already had a jolt, continue to stay wary. This type of large earthquake does have a fairly predictable pattern of aftershocks that will decay over several weeks and months.
Okay, we're now being told that this was upgraded from an 8.0 magnitude to an 8.2 magnitude. I know that often is the case, but what came to light? Did you guys just go back and look at your readings, or what happened?
Yeah, you know, once you get an earthquake this big, this is not a point. This was several hundred kilometers along the coast and several, at least 100 kilometers probably out toward the ocean. It slipped several meters when it happened. And so when this big area, when this big patch slipped, the energy radiated off that and went around the world. And it takes a while to pull all those measurements together and get a really good sense of the energy that was released.
Okay, so we're looking at this quake, which is an 8.2. We know that at least from some of the residents, some of the people we've been speaking to, they were telling us that there were a lot of tremors around EKK, which is this mining town, which was close to the epicenter, that they've been feeling these tremors, you know, for the last week or so. And so they were getting prepared for what they call the big one. Is that possible that people were feeling tremors and they were expecting something like this?
It was indeed at the National Earthquake Information Center here in Golden. We measured over 60 earthquakes, magnitude 4 or larger, since March 15th, and more than 25 were larger than a 5, and there was a 6.7 on March 16th. So there was certainly a swarm of earthquakes that preceded this, a series of foreshocks.
Okay, so when we're looking at the amount of damage which is being created by a magnitude 8.2, what is it, about 60 miles off the coast? What's that, about 100 kilometers off the coast, maybe 20 kilometers below the seabed. What sort of destructive force can that bring? Because so far we're hearing, for at least this initial stage, from the Deputy Interior Minister, that there's no reports of any major damage.
Well, you know, probably the largest damage is going to be from waves impacting the coast. The shaking impacted at an intensity 6, which is enough that's a strong shaking, and it's enough for people to very much feel it and knock things off shelves and make a mess. It looks like there would have been, just under maybe 500,000 people who felt that type of shaking. So the shaking in this type of event is not the main cause of damage. It could be the earthquake, the waves that are from the raising of the seabed. Okay,
so the tsunami, the waves, which we're still waiting for the full impact of that to play out in the next couple of hours. As far as the power of this earthquake being felt around the region, how far away did they feel this, and what would they have felt?
Well, you know, just reports are still coming in, but it looks like as far away as, I don't know, down to Tocopilla, about 300 kilometers south of EKK, and on up past, let's get all the way into Peru. Probably would have been feeling at least light shaking, and so the effects would have been felt very widely.
So what does that tell you about the power of this quake?
This is a big one. You know, this isn't like the monsters we've had recently, the Tohoku event in Japan and the Sumatra event and the recent Male event. It's a step below those, but it's certainly a very respectable large earthquake. And in fact, this one's not a surprise for once. This is a place that was expected to have a large subduction earthquake. It was identified as a so-called gap quite a while ago. The last big one was 1877 and 8.8. So when you put the foreshocks together with the lack of large historical ruptures, this one makes sense.
Okay, Rich Briggs there with the U.S. Geological Survey in Golden, Colorado, giving us a breakdown of what this quake actually means, the full force of it, and what we can expect in the next couple of hours. Rich, thank you for that. We also have on the line Dr. Mark Simons. He is a professor at the Seismological Laboratory at the California Institute of Technology. He joins us on the line now. He's in Pasadena, California, which is around the Los Angeles area, an area well known for earthquakes, which has in fact experienced earthquakes in the last week or so. But Professor, my first question for you, you've been looking at the information, you've been looking at the data from this earthquake. What are you seeing? Do we have Dr. Mark Simons there?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Oh, great. Okay, we've got you, which is a start. My first question for you, sir, is I'm told that right now you're analyzing the information which is coming in from this earthquake. What are you seeing? What's your take on all of this so far?
Well, right now, as your previous interviewee mentioned, this is a place that has last had a big earthquake in 1877 and 1868. So we're expecting a very large earthquake in this area, anywhere from an 8.5 to a magnitude 9. The Pacific plate comes towards the Nazca plate comes towards Chile and Peru at around 8 centimeters a year, and so we expect to see around 11 meters of fault motion totally accumulated over the last 140 years. This earthquake is not as big as the one we would expect to be here. So we are somewhat concerned that there is still a much larger earthquake waiting to happen in this area. Now, this area is one, as previously mentioned, is an area where we've been expecting a large earthquake sometime, and so there is a lot of instrumentation has been put in place by a whole variety of international teams, geophysical teams, ranging from seismic instruments to geodetic or GPS instruments to measure ground motion. And so we're in the process now of trying to rapidly get access to all of the observations from these networks to try to understand in greater detail what has happened and what do we think could happen in the near future.
So, Dr. Simons, let's just break this down. You're saying that this 8.2 magnitude quake, while powerful and generating a tsunami, this is not the big one, that you are expecting a much more powerful earthquake, and I'm guessing you can't say with any certainty a time frame of when that earthquake may come.
Right. So our intuition would tell us, based on just doing the sums, that there is a potential for a larger earthquake here. Whether that earthquake will happen, whether such an earthquake will happen tomorrow, or whether that earthquake will happen in 30 years, we actually can't really say right now. But once you've shaken the area up with a large earthquake like this, you sort of intuitively understand that the likelihood of a significant earthquake in the area that neighbors or abuts this part of the fault that slipped goes up. And so we've seen in other places, such as in Sumatra, that once one of the earthquakes went, and there was a whole sort of unzippering of the fault over a multi-year period. And so that's what we're really concerned with. And as you mentioned earlier, there was this swarm of seismicity over the last 2 to 3 weeks with several magnitude 6.5 earthquakes. It had us all very concerned ahead of time. So in fact, there are field engineers out in the field right now that were already there to try to get the data to understand what the smaller seismicity was. And so now, of course, they're in a different mode, trying to get observations for this large earthquake. But as I said, not the largest that we expect for this region.
Okay, so Dr. Simons, if we look at where the epicenter of this earthquake is, about 100 kilometers off the coast of Chile, as we've been saying, 20 kilometers below the seabed, when you're talking about this much more powerful earthquake, maybe an 8.5, anywhere up to a magnitude 9 earthquake, which would be devastating if it was in the same area, would it be in the same area that we're talking about here, around the same place where this quake has struck?
That's a wonderful question, and unfortunately, it's a very difficult one to answer. Sometimes very large earthquakes are actually compound events. They are actually unzippering of multiple segments of a fault at the same time. And so what we've seen in other places like in Japan and in decades past is sometimes the whole area goes as one large event, and sometimes it goes piecemeal, like separate little pieces. And there's no way of predicting what's going to happen. All we can do is use the past as a guide and make sure that people are prepared for the possibility of a larger event here, because it certainly has happened in the past, and this event has not, in effect, spent the budget that we expect has accumulated in terms of potential slip on this fault.
Okay, Dr. Mark Simons there, joining us from Pasadena, California, from the California Institute of Technology, giving us an update. He's actually looking at the information right now, and his concern that he was just telling us is that this may be not the big one, which many people have been expecting in the area. Essentially, that the buildup of pressure on those fault lines, according to Dr. Simons, is a much greater release is needed, much more than an 8.2 magnitude. He's saying anywhere up to a magnitude 9 earthquake, and obviously they can't tell us exactly when that would happen. He said it could happen tomorrow, it could happen 30 years from now. But of course, right now the immediate concern is the earthquake and the tsunami, which has followed. We know there are tsunami warnings and watches throughout all of Latin America pretty much at this point. We will continue to follow this story. We'll have a lot more on the earthquake, the evacuation, and of course those concerns about the tsunami after a short break. You're watching CNN.